everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's episode of When I Grew Up. On today's episode, I have my friend Gina with me today. Gina, what did you change your last name? I was going to say Gina Chung, but you got married. Didn't you?
I didn't legally change my last name because of the licensing process. So
yes.
I'm licensed now, and I'll get to it once I'm off of maybe maternity leave or kind of finding my stabilization after, I go back to work.
Yeah.
But I'm still Gina Chung right now.
Okay, well, Gina, thank you so much for joining me today. She is a licensed therapist, and she's going to go into detail about what kind of therapist she is. But I just really appreciate you being here because I know Gina is a mom of two and also with a newborn. So she's giving me her time to share her wisdom with the rest of us. So thank you again, Onni. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
So I called her Onni. I called her Onni for those of you that aren't Korean and don't know what that means. It just means like older sister type of person. And she truly is somebody that when I met her in college at UC Irvine was somebody I looked up to. We were in ministry together and I haven't talked to her in like 10 years. So for me, this is really a treat. But without wasting too much of your time today, let's get right into it. So Gina, can you tell me more about what type of therapist you are?
Yeah, sure. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I don't work in the traditional therapist environment as other people are familiar with. My title is actually Behavioral Health Clinical Care Manager, and it's actually in the utilization management of an insurance company. What that means is that I work for an insurance company called HealthNet, and we all have our own insurance companies, like our medical insurance. And in that medical insurance, there's a mental health section of the insurance. Like if you want to find a therapist or whatnot, you call your medical insurance and say, hey, I would like to get some referrals and whatnot. So you use your medical insurance, or if you do have that option. And what I do is if a person with that HealthNet insurance that I work for is hospitalized, let's say for suicidal ideations, or they, basically need some detoxing because they're addicted to alcohol. And so any kind of inpatient services that they need, whether it is residential rehabilitation for substance abuse or whatnot, the process is that the hospitals that admit the patients, they need to call us, the insurance company, to request for prior authorization. And they need to give us the clinical information to see whether they are medically cleared to go and be hospitalized in that hospital. And I'm the one who basically filters that. I take in all the clinical information and I look at the assessment and say, okay, you know what, this person is definitely needing services. And so I take in all that assessment, and with my clinical judgment, I authorize them. And I basically, And so I have to go through all of that process. So I work with a psychiatrist, and I work with, other licensed therapists, and we all have to be licensed to do this job. And so, basically the hospitals call us, and I basically give them prior authorizations to have those patients be admitted to their hospital. And that's kind of in a nutshell.
So, I mean, okay. First of all, I had never even heard of this position before, but I guess
it's very unique.
I mean, I guess if I, have never had these types of medical conditions, I wouldn't really know either. But so you're basing this off of like what you're reading. Do you actually meet with the patient at all?
No. So basically, it's if you think about it, it's an office job if you think about it, but you're using your clinical judgment because the hospitals call you and they basically say, hey, I have one of your members and this is the information we have. This is what they're saying, and Also, we check their blood pressures. We see if there's any, like, if for example, if they got hospitalized because they were having suicidal thoughts or they actually attempted, then we take in all of that information. And based on that information, we see if they meet that medical criteria. And then we do that. Yeah, it's a very, you never knew they even did this, right?
No, no. So, I mean, so what you're saying is basically the insurance company needs to make sure that these claims are legitimate.
Yes, basically. Yeah.
So, what
Yeah.
is, if I can ask, like,
Yeah.
is there a litmus, like, to, like, what is and what isn't, like, legitimate?
Yeah, and so there's different levels of hospitalization. There's, like inpatient, and there's intensive outpatient, where it's like intensive, but it's like partial hospitalization. So there's different tiers of hospitalizations too, and depending on that, you see the severity of like how severe the condition is, and then based on that, you say, you know what, yeah, this person is appropriately in this um, like level of services. And it also kind of helps us kind of evaluate if they are in the appropriate level of care too. For example, if they're in like a lower level of care hospitalization, but I feel like, what they're telling me is a bit more severe, then I say, hey, maybe you should actually kind of get them into a higher level of care of hospitalization. So we do that quality of care too. Yeah, you don't think that your health insurance has these quality care people, but we do, to make sure that they're utilizing their insurances appropriately.
Wow,
Yeah,
wow,
yeah.
okay. So what is, like, I mean, I'm sure things have changed a little bit with COVID, and, I'm assuming,
Hmm.
well, you mentioned earlier that you're on maternity leave right now.
Yes.
But before all of that and before all these big things happening, what did a typical day for you look like?
Well, we were in an office and it was double doored, like, because of, HIPAA, and because of personal information. It's an insurance company, so you don't want a lot of personal information to get out. So it was, very strict, whoever goes in and out of the office. My husband can't even come into the office because I couldn't even visit in the office when I was interviewing, because there's all these personal information in the office. So
Wow.
when COVID happened, we were told to work from home, but they advised us maybe you should have a locked cabinet, trying to do every measure to just make sure that we have secure information, but being appropriate to the environment that we're in with COVID, to make sure that everyone's safe. And so we had to work remotely, kind of connect everything through the different, like, making sure the insurance phone number comes to us, but like everything, it just had to be done remotely. And I think our insurance company is slowly starting to realize, oh, wow, maybe this can be done remotely. I don't know. But but I've been working remotely since this COVID happened, and it's been kind of tough because I have my son at home, but I have to make sure I can lock my door, make sure everything's like hidden, or like it's locked. Nobody else can get my information. My phone conversations are not seeping out and all that stuff, because it's very personal information.
That's crazy. That is
Yeah.
insane. I never even thought about how it affect people in that way. Like,
Yeah.
having to work from home.
Well,
Uh,
interesting fact though, our job actually got busier, which is, kind of interesting, because a lot of people were relapsing on substance use because of this COVID situation. And so we were actually having more detox patients. Like, we were really busy because a lot of them are relapsing because they're just home and they're not utilizing their coping skills. They don't have their community. Yes, they have their Zoom community, but it was really tough for them. So I think it was kind of a bit tough for mental health patients.
Wow,
And
that's crazy.
yeah,
I mean, it makes
yeah,
complete sense. And I feel like
yeah,
even before you had mentioned the relapse, I was thinking, I guess even people just being alone by themselves
yeah.
all the time and things like resurfacing would, wow, that's crazy. So it's been
Yeah, and
over
part of,
here.
sorry for interrupting, but part of my job description also is when a member actually calls our insurance line, there's actually a crisis line. I didn't know health insurance have that, but if they make any remarks of, severe depression or hurting themselves or others, it actually gets through us, the licensed therapist, and we actually have to talk to them and handle those crisis calls,
Have
because
you had
they
to
do
deal
have
with
the
some of
crises.
those in the last year?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll explain it more later, or I'll expand more later. But yeah, it's surprisingly enough, people when they're frustrated with claims, or where they're when they're frustrated, they make these statements that's kind of like, red flag. And so it just comes to us, and we just kind of talk to them, hey, what's going on, and kind of like de-escalate them, and help them. Or if someone needs to be called, if the authorities need to be called. So yeah, we have to do
Wow.
those.
I had
Yeah.
no idea. So like all health insurance does stuff like this?
I'm not really sure, but the one that I work for does, and I think a lot of them do. Yeah, that should be
Oh,
included. I think, yeah.
so I mean, it makes sense that they would have,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
okay, well, if you don't mind taking me back to like the beginning, those
Hmm.
UCI days, like,
Hmm.
um,
Sure.
what did you study in college?
I actually studied sociology,
Okay.
a minor in education.
And why did you decide on that when you first entered college?
I was actually very let's see, like I didn't have any much goal actually when I was in college, if I think about it now. And I was very simple minded. I just wanted to graduate, and I didn't even have any goal of what kind of job I wanted. I just said, you know what, I'm going to graduate because people just want a bachelor's degree, and I'll just get a full time job. It doesn't matter what kind of job it is. I was really directionless. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And the only reason why I decided to study sociology is because I love people. And that was literally the only reason, because I love people. I love studying people. I love, learning about relationships and all that. And the only reason why I didn't study psychology was because I didn't want to study the biological aspect of that. I didn't want to learn about the different types of, like, the brain, the left and the right. I didn't want to learn all that. I just wanted to learn about people. And that was literally my only reason of why I majored in it.
Now that you say that though, and
Yeah.
the little time I spent with you in college, I mean that is what I remember about you is that you were truly relational and really like I mean for me like you always made me laugh and I felt like every conversation I had with you even if it was short it was very like meaningful and you were really engaged so I feel like you being where you are now as a therapist makes complete sense in my head, but I'm curious to know. So after you graduated college and you said you were kind of directionless,
Hmm.
what put you on this path?
So I graduated, and then I did find a full time job shortly after, which was in logistics, which is like, freight, like, like shipments, and you just do administrative work, you're just, doing all those calculations just because they hired me. And it was through the UCI career website. They were just hiring a person with a bachelor's degree. And I think I worked there for about a year, and I thought, oh man, like, what am I doing? Um, and so I took about a year break. I went to, um, I think I left for a church conference for about a month or two. And I came back and I said, you know what? I think I want to do something in relations to disabled people. I've always had a heart of adoption too. I've always been interested in foster care. And so I thought, I don't know, let's see what the Department of Disability has for me. And so I started actually working in early child intervention for autistic children.
Oh,
And so I used to do therapy with them, and they train you. You only need a bachelor's degree to get trained for it, and then once you get the master's, then you can do more. But I was just doing the minimal job as a ABA therapist for autistic children, and then shortly after that, I got into a Goodwill program where I worked with disabled adults. With intellectual disabilities. And I thought, okay, but I think what I was looking for was counseling. But
mm,
because I had my bachelor's degree, I thought, okay, what is the closest thing I could get to? And I think I needed that journey because I didn't really know what I needed. I had to kind of think, okay, I have this level of compassion for people with disabilities, but I wasn't really quite sure where that was. I couldn't really navigate specifically. It wasn't narrow for me. It was just so broad for me.
mm.
And then I decided, oh man, maybe I need to go back to school. And I really am not the studying type. I really am not. I
I feel you.
hate studying. And I was trying to do everything that I can to prevent myself from going back to school. And then I realized this is a tip that I give to a lot of the people who ask about my job is, if you want to know if this job is for you, look at the job descriptions at that job, right? Like look at the job description to see that if this is what you want to do. And I'm looking at the descriptions, and a marriage and family therapist is what I really wanted to do. Every time I looked for a job in counseling, they always needed this requirement of an LMFT, LMFT, MFT, MFT, social worker, MFT. And so I thought, okay, maybe I just need to go back to school. And I really didn't want to, but I had to. And so I looked into it. And if that administrative assistant did not chase after me, I really wouldn't have enrolled. But she really was persistent in calling me, be like, hey, are you still interested? If you need any other information. She was very informative and she was very motivating. And I was looking for a Christian one too, because I just wanted to go in a program of faith. And so she really like motivated me very well. And so I just decided to go for it and apply for Hope International University and enroll myself in their marriage and family program.
Wow. Okay. So,
Yeah.
you were saying you were reading like the descriptions of the job and
Yeah.
the marriage
Yeah.
and family therapist kept coming up. What
Yeah.
was it about that? Like, what is the
It
definition?
was, yeah, it was the counseling. It was the one-on-one counseling. That was the main thing that got me. Like I was always wanting to do counseling and therapist. And the description, I forget what the description, but now that I think about it, it was just, I think, like those motivational interviewing or like some kind of like term that was very personal to me, relational to me,
Mm.
and it's part of it. One of the jobs that like you need compassion, like, like it was all those kinds of stuff because marriage and family therapist is very similar to a social worker too.
Mm.
And so, I was looking into all those descriptions, and I think the word counseling, though, it was the main thing that I wanted to get into. And I was kind of thinking, should I get into student counseling at colleges,
Mhm.
But I was thinking, no, I want to get into marriage and family therapist. Like, that's what I want to learn.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah. And I was thinking, I was even looking at like psychologist programs too. And one person described the difference between marriage and family therapy and psychology is, again, the brain and the analyzing and all of that is in psychology, where marriage and family therapist is mainly focusing on like environment around you, like how your family dynamic affected you. And that was, I was so affected by my family. I mean, who's not? But that really struck a chord in me. And I said, yeah, that's what I'm interested in, And so that's why I decided to go for that program.
So the word counseling you kept saying too. Sorry, I
Yeah.
just am curious. Like, it what was it highlighted for you because you truly like wanted to help people?
Yeah, I loved, and I was kind of scared because I didn't think I was such a great listener. I'm still not sure if I'm a great listener, but it comes with practice, of course. But I love learning about people. When I meet a person, I love learning about their stories, their backgrounds. I'm so interested in their family, their early childhood, and I'm genuinely interested. And that's when I realized this is my job because I can really relate and and have that interest. Having an interest is actually a tool for a therapist.
Mhm.
Having that curiosity is one of the tools as a therapist, in my opinion. And
Mm.
so, yeah, I think that was what it was. I wanted to help people, but of course, I had to kind of sophisticate that also because ever since I was in college, I think I had the savior complex in myself, like I want to like save everyone, like I want to help everybody. But I think it just, as time went by, I kind of was able to sophisticate, okay, like which direction is more appropriate for myself, which was counseling and having boundaries and all of that stuff. But yeah, that word counseling, that, not that I am better than anyone to counsel anyone, but if I can learn the skills, I
Mhm.
would love to because I think I went through so much in my life. And I think because of that, I think I'm able to have more of that compassion and empathy for people, to listen to their stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so
Yeah.
you decided so what you were saying is this administrative assistant kept pursuing you? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah,
you were
she was
kind of like, "I don't
pursuing
wanna
me.
go back to school," but this lady was
Yeah.
like, "No, you gotta do it?"
She was basically like, I emailed her like, "Hey, I'm interested in your program." It was like a general email too, I think. But I think, Hope International is a pretty small school, I think, in my opinion. And so I think they just really pursued me, like, hey, like, what is it like, what is your question? Any question, like, you can answer, like, and then she followed up with me. She kept on following up with me and saying, do you have any other questions? And, and that's when I was like, you know what, this is doable. I was worried about finances. I was worried about, grades, like what I needed, like I didn't want to call UCI for my transcript. Like everything just seemed such a
Right,
hassle,
right.
Like, am I really like motivated? But she really was like, this is all you need. You need to do this, and she really made it seem possible. And
Mm,
that's why I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I can.
wow, that's amazing, that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm still
Uh,
Facebook friends with her. It's amazing.
yeah. Okay, so at Hope International, this program, how long is it?
So it's a 60-unit program. And
Uh-huh.
so it took me about 2 years. And I think it
Okay.
will take average about 2 years for everyone. And they offered night programs, thankfully for me. And so I was working full time
Oh my
and going
gosh.
to the program at nighttime. I know. And I was getting married and all of this at that time. And so it was pretty gnarly. It was pretty wild at that time, but it was possible, and I'm glad that I did it when I had the energy.
Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, so, the program itself, what is required? Is there, like, just a bachelor's, or do you need to take a test, or
Yeah, so yeah, I don't think I needed to do any like what are the like the GREs and stuff like
Yes,
that, right?
yes.
Like well, I didn't need to do that, thankfully. I needed to I needed to turn in my transcript, and then I needed to complete some like questionnaires that they have for me and some recommendations from other people, application and all of that. And full disclosure, my GPA was not up to par. And so I really didn't think they were going to accept me. This is like seriously hope for everyone, because
Yeah.
part of the reason why, like, I really went to college aimlessly. And I thought, you know what? I was even amazed I graduated in 4 years because my GPA was horrible. I really don't know how I even graduated, but I did. And I was so embarrassed to turn in my transcript because it was really not up to par and they had a minimum. And they said, you know what, your GPA is not up to par, but you will be under some kind of probation, academic probation for the first year, so that like when you are showing like progress, then like we're able to really keep you in the program. And I was like, that's fine by me,
Yeah.
And I actually graduated with a 4.0. Can you believe that?
No, I believe it. I
It's
believe
because
it.
I was really motivated and this is
Yeah.
something that I really wanted to learn. And so, I mean, seriously, this is for people who have low GPAs. It's still possible. You could still go to school. It is doable, And so I turned in my application and then they needed to interview me. I don't know if other programs do this. This was a Christian one, and I don't know. Maybe that's why they wanted to check or whatever it was. There was an interviewing process, and so I had to sit down with one of the professors and actually went through an interviewing process. They wanted to know my story and the reason why I wanted to do it, and and all of that stuff. So, and after that, I was admitted, thankfully, placed on academic probation first year or
But you
first
know
quarter,
what
I
is
think.
but I mean, for me, it's just so clear that in taking this step, like, you wanted this,
Yes,
You
for sure.
definitely want and you were not aimless anymore, and that's just
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so, like, if it's a Christian school and a Christian program, does that mean you're a Christian therapist? Or, like, like,
Um,
your title or d like
yeah, sure. The program itself is actually accredited by by California or by the state or whatnot. So this program is a state program. Um, it's just that they put in a Christian subject like once or twice so that you can so that you can use it as a Christian therapist. But no, I'm not. I don't think I'm a Christian therapist. Like I'm not just
Right.
labeled as a Christian therapist. I'm trained to, meet with anyone. It doesn't
Yeah.
really matter. Yeah, but having that faith, class in there. It's just helping you kind of navigate to how to implement faith into your job as a therapist. But no, I'm not labeled as a Christian therapist.
Okay. That was my next question.
Yeah,
So for you, I guess why was it important for you to find a Christian program?
I think, honestly, I think it's also because I was involved in church too, and I really wanted to see how I can use my counseling in the church too, and I just wanted to, I really didn't know, like, because when I grew up in a church and when I'm counseling my kids, when I'm, giving advice to my, youth kids, for example, or younger generations, I didn't really know how to, counsel them. I just give them advice out of my own experience, right? And I just didn't know how to professionally do that, including the faith. And I was really interested in how this program would do that. And honestly, it wasn't that different technically with what I've learned, like I feel like therapy was basically in a language of the secular world, but what we do already in the church. But still, like I was interested in how to professionally do that so that I'm appropriately, like they teach you boundaries too, and I think that's what I needed to learn the most, and also not expressing so much of my emotion onto other people when I'm offended or when I'm affected by what they say, but really kind of looking at the goal of the conversation and drawing boundaries. And that's what I've learned. And I think it was very appropriate for me because I was interested in utilizing it in the church and just in general and how I can be of influence when I even meet other people.
Yeah, it seems like
Yeah.
like for me, I'm like, wow, this is a great tool, like to have.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
um, so after you graduated from this program, now you're a licensed therapist. What were some of the next steps that you took, Gina?
So once you are in the program, technically you're not licensed yet. So
Oh, oh, oh.
while you're in the program, you are considered as a marriage and family therapist trainee,
Okay,
and you need to volunteer for about 500 hours while in the program to graduate
I
and
see.
with a thesis and all of that stuff at the end. And so I need to do that. And then once you graduate, you become an associate marriage and family therapist. You're not even licensed yet. You're
Okay,
not even
okay.
licensed there yet. You're considered an associate marriage and family therapist. And you can get a job as an associate marriage and family therapist. People will still hire you, but you won't get paid as much as a licensed marriage and family therapist, probably. And the reason why you're an associate marriage and family therapist is because you need 3,000 hours of training or experience before you can even apply to take the licensing exam. And so,
Wow.
I know it's such it's so rigorous. I don't know why 3,000. I mean, yeah, but you need 3,000 hours, and part of it is with adults, part of it is with family. They make sure that it's with like, different tiers of people. So it's like with children, with adults, with couples and all of that, and individual and all of that. So
So
you have
how
to
long
collect.
did it take you to fulfill
Wow.
3,000 hours?
Well, let me tell you, right after when I graduated from the graduate program, the MFT program, my husband just graduated from his graduate program for an MDiv to be a
Oh my
pastor.
goodness.
And so we both graduated from our grad program and we said, yippee, and we got married. And so we both quit our jobs and we actually traveled for about 6 months. And
What?
so we actually, yes, because we just decided to, I know, and this is so not like me because I'm so goal oriented in life. But my husband's more about, hey, let's just try this out. And I'm so glad I did. We traveled around 20 countries around Asia and Europe for 6 months, backpacking, with
That's
our
so
wedding
cool.
with our wedding money. Oh my goodness, with our wedding money. And yeah, so I did not collect any hours actually right after I graduated. I didn't even have a job. I
Oh
just
my
literally
gosh.
traveled and we came back and then he found a job at a church and then I found a job as an associate marriage and family therapist and you can get paid. And then I did that for full time. But I do tell these to people who's interested in my program. The goal, a lot of people enter into MFT programs because they want to open up their private practices. A lot of people, like their image that they have is you're in a room with another person, you're taking notes and you're listening to them. And that's what they envision, when they get into the program.
Sure.
But it's really hard to get a full-time job as an associate marriage and family therapist because insurance doesn't pay associate marriage and family therapist. Insurance only pays licensed marriage and family therapists. And so you're going to get a lot of jobs that are county contracted, which is by the government. And it's the government-based mental health services, which is a lot with a low socioeconomic, population, and so low income families. So you're going to deal a lot, and those are the only people that will hire you, honestly, after you graduate from the grad programs. That will pay you full time. Yeah, you can work at a private practice, but you're going to meet maybe like 7-8 clients a week compared to when you can get 20-30 hours a week, And so you're going to probably, work at a lot of those county contractor works where you're going to work with a lot of traumatic based families. A lot of kids are foster kids, and you're going to be visiting them at their homes. You're going to be visiting their schools. You're going to be working with their social workers. So I honestly, it was social work that I was doing. I was visiting families. I was mediating. I was doing family therapy. I was taking crisis calls and all of that. And so I did do a lot of those work in the adult mental health field and also the children mental health field. And, I'm not going to lie, at least in California, I had to do a lot of those county contracted work to get my hours. Yeah.
Man, I feel like that would, I don't know. I just feel like, you mentioned you worked with a lot of like social economic, like on kind of I guess, what do you say? What were you saying it was called?
Like the lower, not the middle, but even lower. I mean, I don't know how to appropriately.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's just really challenging in itself. I talked to a social worker on the podcast too, and so like, and that in itself, I feel like is just so difficult. I mean, how did you? I mean, what was the most challenging part for you during that time of your life?
It's so funny because I think. When you're in the MFT program, they actually teach you how to do self-care, actually how to turn it off, and you actually learn a lot about yourself because part of the tool is not expressing yourself so much to your client, right? You're supposed to be there for them. And so when I get home, I had to learn how to turn it off. But a lot of times I had after hours. I'm in charge of like after hours also sometimes. And I don't know, sometimes you just laugh at yourself too. Like I've had incidents where they would call me at like 2 a.m. in the morning and say they wanted to hurt themselves, and you have to kind of like help them de-escalate, or sometimes and then there's drugs mixed in sometimes for the adults. And so you're kind of like, okay, like, what are they saying? They're under the influence, and all these kind of crises calls. And sometimes when I even visit homes, and my supervisor even have to be like, hey, if you don't feel safe, you have to leave. I've had situations like that too. I've had situations where I had to call the police, and I told my husband, oh man, I'm going to be on the news. I really thought, and it's so interesting. And I tell this to my husband all the time. It's funny because I was working in Long Beach. I was going to a lot of, single parent homes and a lot of traumatized kids and all of that. And I got to see a lot. And it's so interesting because I did work in private practice after that in Newport area, in this really nice neighborhood. And, I got to, sit down with this girl who's been to private school, and, she, grew up with her parents who were both doctors and all of that. But her struggle and trauma was almost similar to this kid that grew up in Long Beach with a single mom or who was in the system, which is so interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It's so interesting to me. And I was like, wow, I thought I was, kind of escaping that world, to kind of, get into this more, not too severe type of area. But no, it was similar. Of course, it's not going to be exactly the same, but the tools that I were using, man, it was, it wasn't that different. So it kind of, it kind of struck a light in me, I was like,
Yeah,
wow,
yeah,
it's
definitely.
everywhere.
It just seems like, I
Yeah.
mean, from what you're saying, it's like within families, like the issue is the same sometimes.
Yeah.
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 Oh
Yeah. And the
man.
struggles they go through, it's very similar.
Yeah. So I mean, during that time in the beginning when you're like getting your hours and stuff like that and working full time
Hmm.
for this for the county and stuff, was there ever a time, cuz I mean, I feel like, I mean, getting late night phone calls, like I don't know, I
Oh,
would be like,
yeah.
like, but was there ever a time where you're like, is this really the job for me? Or did you ever
Oh,
doubt
yeah.
it at all?
I did. And I thought, okay, this is so funny. I thought, you know what? I just need to grind it out for 3,000 hours and I'm going to quit and I'm going to just open up my own practice, and then I'm gonna do what I do. I'm gonna meet with clients that I want to meet, because as a therapist, you could specialize in things. You could be a couples therapist. You could be trauma based. You could be emotion. It could be so many. It's so versatile. You can
Mm,
and that's how therapists brand themselves too. Like if you go to psychologytoday.com, that's how you can find the therapist that's right for you.
okay.
And they have their specialties. Like, I specialize in this. I specialize in, trauma. I specialize in structural therapy. I specialize in EMDR, which is like, like doing different tools, to work with traumatized patients. So there's so
See.
many different, yeah, specialties. So I thought, you know what, like my specialty is going to be couples and like not children. I didn't want to do children anymore. I wanted to do more with adults, young adults who are looking for, I don't know, direction. I don't know what I was thinking at that time, but I was thinking, you know what, that's my direction. So I just need to grind it out for 3,000 hours, and then I'm going to quit. I'm going to do, and I really thought I was going to do private practice. That was what I was going for at that
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
so I said, you know what, that's what I'm going to do. And then I quit. I actually did quit after I got my 6,000 hours. And then while I was studying, I was working part time, like at a private practice, and then kind of gaining experience from there.
Mhm, mhm.
And while studying for my exam.
Okay, so after the 3,000 hours, you study for an exam that's, I'm assuming, the licensing exam.
Yeah, you could take the one ethics exam while you're in the program, or I think post grad. I'm not really quite sure when, but you take that, and then you have to take the clinical exam, which is about 170 questions.
Ugh.
Yeah, and for 4 hours,
Oh gosh.
and yeah, that's that's rough,
Uh,
and you have to, yeah.
So, so, what was I gonna ask you? Oh yeah, so you're studying for that while you're at the private practice you mentioned, and
Yeah,
is this the one that in Newport?
yeah,
Okay. Um, I'm curious, like, why does someone go to a marriage and family therapist? Like, what are some of the
sure.
reasons to even seek one out?
Sure. I think, a lot of people, I mean, there's a lot of stigma, right, to seeking a therapist, right? And a lot of people don't even know what a marriage and family therapist is. They just think it's a psychiatrist or a psychologist, right? And psychiatrists are usually the ones who prescribe, antidepressants for you, right? I can't prescribe any medication, but psychiatrists can. And you can meet with a psychologist too. But and so it depends on, whether you can go to a marriage and family therapist or not. But I think you get to a point when you're living your life and you think, man, I think I'm depressed, or I'm having some anxiety. Some people who have panic attacks, a lot of times, especially people with anxiety, they sometimes first go to like hospitals first because they think they're having a heart attack. Um, and they go and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you. And it might actually be that you were having a panic attack. And so they're
Mm.
like, oh, maybe we could refer you to some therapists. And so, sometimes they seek for that. And a lot of clients that I've had actually had experiences with therapists before too, when they were
Mm.
children or when they were teenagers or young adults. And sometimes it's like their first time ever. And so I think it depends, but I think they do. The first time is always hard, and sometimes I tell people, finding a therapist is like finding your doctor. You're not, if you don't like your therapist, you can find another therapist. It's like finding your match, because it's a relation. You're going to tell them your whole personal information. They're not going to share with anybody else.
Mm.
But you don't have to just get stuck with that one therapist,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but it's like finding your dentist or finding like your doctor, and a lot of times as a therapist, you also collaborate with their psychiatrist if they are taking medications too. You could collaborate with them saying, this is what this client is taking and, like what's appropriate for them. Or I could even say, hey, maybe you could talk to your psychiatrist about that, if it's,
Mm.
if you're having any issues medically after taking your medications and stuff like that.
So, okay,
Yeah.
like I know you don't do this right now. You're working for the insurance
Yeah,
company,
no
but
problem.
I'm curious, like, I'm not, I have friends that are in therapy and they just think
Yeah.
it's amazing, and I
Yeah.
believe it. I believe it. I'm like, maybe everyone needs a therapist. Like, I feel like for mental
Yeah.
health and everything, it would be so, like, I feel like I would gain a lot from it. But
Hmm.
what I haven't met with the therapist yet, but what I'm curious about too is like what I imagine happening is like the person talking to the therapist and you're just listening. But then at
Hmm.
what point do you like engage? I'm like,
Sure. Yeah, sure. I think it's hard because it's hard to kind of teach, when you're even in the program, you're like, you got to read their body languages,
I
right?
see.
Like, so they teach you different tools, and there's like, I think like 10 different ways of therapy, right? And then you kind of choose what is your way, whether you use by engaging their family or if you want to use like just um, like motivational interviewing where you interview them or you go through questions or there's so many different
I
methods
see.
of
Okay.
therapy. And but sometimes when you meet that person you kind of see what their response is also,
Mm.
sometimes, for example, exposing my personal, like, I do draw boundaries with my clients, but sometimes maybe talking about me as a mom might help that client because she's a fellow mother.
Mm.
And so you could kind of see their reaction there too. Or sometimes I feel like, I can't share anything about myself to this client because then she's going to think of me differently.
Mm.
And so you kind of have to really gauge what is appropriate for that member. And also in that law and ethics exam or whatnot, you kind of see also if this person does need therapy too. As a therapist, you kind of think, okay, like ethically, do you need to meet with me? Because if you're getting better, you don't have to meet me anymore.
Mm.
And you have to have that line of ethics when you're meeting with your clients because you want what's best for them, and so
Interesting.
yeah, you have that guideline to make sure you're doing what's best for them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um does your like licensing and therapy ever like bleed in with your like personal relationships?
You It's so funny because so I'm really interested in personality types. So I actually went to a Myers-Briggs program.
Oh,
And so
okay.
I actually have that license as a Myers-Briggs administrator. So I can, administer those exams to people and
Uh-huh,
actually have
uh-huh.
sessions with them because I'm so interested in those
I love
Myers-Briggs
that kind of
personality types,
stuff too.
right? Yeah. So I actually can do that. And so since my husband's a pastor, and so he does a lot of couples counseling because he marries a lot of people.
Mm.
And so what he does is before he officiates the wedding, he meets with the couple about like 3 or 4 times, like once every other week, to kind of like talk to them about marriage, what it looks like. And then he includes me, of course, because I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, right? And I'm
Yeah.
also, I got my license in Myers Briggs. So, of course, I'm gonna
Yeah, yeah.
join. And so what I do is I administer this personality type test to them, and then I actually like analyze it with them, and then I'll go through this thing called the genogram, which is like their whole family history, and I go through this whole thing with them, and I go through the whole couples counseling and all of that with my husband
Wow.
because of his job. Yeah. And this is for every couple that he officiated, at least in our church. And it was becoming too much. So I said, you know what? Like, let's just do it for our church members first
Yeah.
because I can't do this for everyone you marry
Right,
because he was
right,
marrying
right.
his friends sometimes. And I was like, I can't do this because it takes so much work to like
Right.
evaluate their assessments and you know what I mean?
But
And
that sounds
so it was getting too much.
amazing.
Yeah. So we were just doing that. So I was doing a lot of couples counseling from that. And then, in general, like but what's funny is as a therapist, you're not supposed to have someone as your client because that will form a dual relationship. So,
Uh,
for example, I will never be able to counsel you, Blair, because I already know you. We already
right,
have a relationship before.
right.
And so I will refer you to another person that you don't know. And so if we go to the same church, and so I don't really, I'm not really my church people's therapist
Okay,
either,
okay,
like
yes.
I don't really do that. Because it's we're not supposed to. And so like a lot of times my church girls ask me like, oh, like, Gina, can I meet with you? And I'm like, no, because that's a dual relationship. I have to refer you out, but I
Yeah.
can listen to your story and see what will be appropriate for
Yeah.
you. But because of the nature of my job, I do like listen a lot.
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
have to like use my tools.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so this is the reason why actually I got so burnt out of counseling people, of
Mm,
listening to people, because it became so familiar with me that I'm not like good at it, but I know how to, you know, engage with people with like counseling. And so as a mom, it became so draining.
mm,
So draining. And and even when I sit down with a person, like even when I was doing private practice, part of the reason why I'm not in private practice anymore was because it got too draining for me
yeah.
to sit down with a person for an hour and do that. I loved it, but as a mother, it was just too hard. I just wanted, for a weird reason, I just wanted an office job where I don't have to think about it, and just an 8 to 5 job, which is why I got into this job that I'm at right now,
Right, right,
because
right, right.
it didn't have to be this infinite world of possibilities of what this person is thinking about, like how I can help them. Like, it was just, it wasn't concrete enough for me at this stage of my life.
Sure,
And
yeah.
so, and I, even with my best friend, I say, because my best friend's a therapist too. And I say, I think private practice is something that I would practice maybe when I am older, when my kids are older too, to build my brand, to do it, because a lot of times when you're, just working, you don't see a therapist during the day. You see a therapist after your work, right? I don't
Mm,
have time to meet with a person after they're done working because I'm a mom. I have to tend to my kids, right? But maybe when I'm older, I could do more of that stuff, which is why I say this license is very versatile because you can do so many different types of jobs, depending on the stage of your life. And I know a lot of moms that are in utilization as a licensed therapist because they can work from home and they could also turn it off after, 8 to 5 or whatnot. And
sure,
so
yeah, yeah.
it's
So,
still
okay,
appropriate for me right now.
so I like it hits a chord with me when you say, I'm a mom, it's draining to sit with somebody for an hour. But for those of the people listening that have no idea what that's like,
Sure.
could you speak to that just a little bit? So like
Yeah.
like the draining part, like, can you expand on what you're trying to
Yeah,
explain?
for sure. I think what it was is, for example, when you're in private practice and, when you are, a lot of private practices, when you are hired under a practice, a lot of them won't offer health insurances either. It's
Mhm.
probably a 1099 job. You're contracted, as a individual contractor. And so let's say they pay you, for example, X amount of money per hour, then, you get tax, you don't get tax deducted, right? And so you're using that money to pay for your own kids' insurance. Nothing is really set for you. And so, if you meet 28 clients, then you get paid 28 clients that week. And if you have your own private practice, that's even more because you're paying rent for your office and whatnot. So you're building your own business, like
Mhm.
a doctor, for example, right? And so you can go to a place that will do the paperwork for you, but you will still, not have those, oh, you have your own insurance and whatnot. So that was like the number one thing for me. I didn't like the fact because my husband's, church is not going to offer health insurance for all of us. That's, like a, big company,
Mhm,
so
mhm, mhm.
I think for me, I just was like, okay, maybe I have to crunch up the numbers. Okay, is this the right path for me? And also in terms of the emotional side,
Yeah.
I meet with a client, and it basically meant the more clients I meet, the more money I was going to make. And I just hated the fact that, man, like I need to meet the quota in order to, feed my
I see.
family, right?
I
And I
see.
hated that. And also, when I sit down with a person and I'm, doing all this, and it was just so tiring because my kid's like a toddler, right? and it was so draining. And I was listening to their stories, and sometimes there are stories where I'm like, oh man, because when you have a client that is having, issues where there's suspect of child abuse, for example, and whatnot, then it's like, oh man, then I need to report this. And then, so it's like all these things in my head. So when I'm done at 5 or 4 or whenever, I'm not really done because I'm thinking about it. And also I need to think about what tools can I use the next day. Like I have to plan ahead, like, okay, when I meet this client, I can talk about this. And to fit all that in, it was just too much for me.
Yeah.
And it was just not the appropriate, and I didn't have enough energy and zeal to do that at the stage of my life.
Sure. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and it was and honestly, the time wasn't going by that fast either for me for some reason. Because I'm so scatter-minded as a mom, maybe that's why we had so much going on. I don't know. It was just kind of not going fast enough for me. I guess I'm more like liking the busy work for the stage of my life. I love it's weird because people think, oh, therapists are very like easygoing. They don't like fast-paced work. But I love
Yeah.
fast-paced work. I love office jobs, which
Yeah.
is so not what my best friend is like. She loves like, just sitting down. And I like that too. But for some reason, in this stage of my life, it was not enjoyable to me.
Mm.
The time wasn't going by fast. I just wanted to get this job done. Like I
Sure.
was so
Yeah.
tired. I was like, I just want to do my job and just be done with it. I don't want to because I was doing that at the private practice, and then I was going home, and then my husband is telling me the church member is going through this, and I'm like, what do you think? And I'm like, man, I can't catch a break.
Yeah.
And you'll be surprised, like a lot of your not your friends, but a lot of people seek you when you have this job, and you don't want to, you learn how to draw boundaries, but it just gets so tired because ethically you're like, I don't want to listen to you, but I do want to give you this, counseling,
Yeah.
and so
Absolutely.
maybe it has to do with my husband's job. I think that's what it is too.
I
I
mean,
think
yeah,
it
I
was
mean,
just
I
so
think
tiring.
pastoral jobs are just you're giving all the time on top of being a
Yeah.
therapist and to give more. I can't even, I'm laughing not because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's just, I resonate a little bit in just certain areas. Like just, not the therapy part, obviously, but I'm laughing because I understand is
Yeah.
why I'm laughing. But,
Yeah.
man, so okay, like you realize at this time of your life it's not for you, but how did you end up then at this insurance company? Just some research
Yeah. And
or
yeah, so I was looking at Indeed, right? And I was looking at, maybe I'll just work somewhere that will give me interest, but I don't know if any private practice would do that. And so I was just looking through Indeed. And then there was a job for this company. And, Indeed has this like review of the companies. And I was looking at the review and they were treating their employees very well. And I've never worked at a company where I was having that satisfaction. Honestly,
Mm.
I've never worked because it was always Blair. When I was working, it was always, man, I'm working this to get somewhere. I'm going to grind it out so I'm going to get somewhere. Even when I was working with autistic children, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this so that I can get somewhere to gain experience. When I was working at Goodwill, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this so that I can get somewhere. It was always, I don't enjoy it 100%, but I'll get there.
Mhm.
And so, I was thinking, okay, well, like, let me just interview for this place. My husband says, they're giving you really great insurance. They're really treating you well. It is an 8 to 5 job that I was not familiar with because a lot of the county contracted work, you're not sitting at an 8 to 5 job. You're driving a lot. You have a lot of free time. It's salary. If you're done earlier, you're done earlier. That was really not like I haven't done an office job since like when I worked at that logistic company right after I graduated. So I was kind of like, I'm not sure. But when I looked at the criteria, it was about like, using your clinical judgment, using your clinical judgment to kind of see like what is appropriate, you assess and all of that kind of seemed appropriate. And I didn't have to work after hours, for example, right?
Yeah,
Because that's what
yeah.
I was doing. And so I thought, okay, I can try. And I interviewed, and then I talked with my supervisor who was interviewing me at that time. And she was describing the job day for me. And I was still not sure, honestly. I'm going to be honest. I was like, if they hire me, they hire me. If they don't, they don't. And I went through, I think two levels of interviews. I think it wasn't just right away. It was like two different levels of interview. And then they decided to hire me. And it was hard because they wouldn't even let me in the office to see how their day was because it was, because of HIPAA, right? They didn't even, I couldn't even look inside to see what it
Right,
was
right,
like, the
right.
environment. And so I got hired and I was like, you know what? Let's just try it out. If I don't, then I think my private practice was willing to take me back. And
Mm.
so I was like, you know what? Let's just try it out. They're going to offer us a full-time job. Let's just try it out. And I tried it out and I really enjoyed it. I
Wow,
was,
yeah.
I tell my friends, I'm like, like I got into this thinking I really wanted to counsel people, but right now in my stage of my life, man, like I really enjoy this job. It's so lightweight
Mm.
and it's fast. It has deadlines, but I can do it. I know this stuff very well. And when I listen about the clients, I've actually seen them in real life when I was working at my other job. So I know
Yeah.
what they're talking about,
Yes.
right? And I have the resources for them. I can give it to them.
Right.
And so it was really appropriate for my life. I just really enjoyed it. And I still do. I really like it a lot.
That's
It's
amazing.
really weird. I know. It's the first time ever that I've ever said, wow, I really enjoy the job that I'm doing.
Wow, what a blessing, what a gift that
It
is.
really is. It really
Wow.
is.
Well, is there anything you don't like about your current job?
The only thing is, I think was going to the office, honestly.
Oh,
But now
okay.
that I'm working
Yeah.
remote, it's like the best.
And you mentioned even your company's kind of realizing maybe we don't need to
Maybe
go in.
I
So
don't
it
know,
could be
but
like
you know what
perfect.
the but another blessing for this is that it was seriously a blessing. This company is only 7 minutes away from my home.
What?
Yes,
That's
and so
awesome.
yes, and my teammates, which is about like 20 people, they're all mothers. They're all mothers. My
Wow.
supervisor was gone for maternity leave and just came back. And so they all understand
Mm,
like how it is to be a mother.
mm,
And for me, and I'm not saying like men cannot do this job either. I'm not saying that at all. It's just that like my teammates, they were all mothers. And for me, in this stage of my life, I really, found it really well. The only thing since you've asked that was kind of it's kind of hard is when those crises calls do come.
mm,
Especially when I am done with my job. But for example, they have a severe case right away, then I can't leave because I have to take care of that case. So I may
mm,
work overtime or I can't get my job done with a deadline because I have this member that I have to deal with. So,
mm.
those spontaneity would be
Yeah,
the only thing. And working full time for 40 hours a week, which
right.
everybody does, but
But
from our jobs, we're not used to doing that. And so, but
sure.
other than that, yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm selling it too much because I really enjoy it, but
No, that's amazing. And I'm so thankful that you were able to even bring this type of occupation to light for me today because
yeah,
I had no idea. And I'm sure there are a ton of people listening that had no clue that this job even existed. It
yeah,
wasn't even a possibility. And yeah, I mean the fact that you love it is just a plus.
yeah, for sure,
Well,
for sure.
I truly appreciate you talking about your entire journey up until now, and I gained
Yeah.
so much from our conversation. I do want to ask you for some advice, but before we sign off with that, I kind of had a question about just Asian Americans. When it comes to Asian American families and mental health, do you have any
Yeah.
like opinions on that? Like just the fact, because okay, like just real talk, like
Yeah.
I think there's a huge stigma, right? Like
Mhm.
especially within Korean American families, Asian American families, like you don't really go seek mental help professionals,
No, no,
right?
you don't. And so I think there is a stigma. I think other ethnicities have a stigma with that too. But yeah, Asian Americans, they think, that you're quote unquote crazy, right? You're going to a psych ward or like you have to be, paranoid to meet with a therapist. And, even with um my parents, like when they heard that I was going to be a therapist, they thought I was going to meet with quote unquote crazy people,
Mm,
right? Which is
mm,
not true, right? And so I think I don't know why there is such a stigma with it. Maybe it's pride, maybe it's shame, because it's a vulnerability aspect. But I think and a lot of Korean people go to churches too, and a lot of them seek their pastors for help, right, for spiritual guidance. But I'm actually educating my husband, saying, you know what, there is a line between spiritual guidance and also professional help.
Mm.
And I really want to educate even the churches, saying, yeah, you can help, but you can't help. There's a certain extent. Like what you're talking about is mental health. It's not really spiritual guidance, which, I mean, people can debate me on that, of course, because there's a gray area, right? Like, because as a pastor, there are no boundaries. You can even go to their homes and to really try to help them. But, it's so hard for pastors to do everything. They're not
Mm.
social workers for everyone, right? And I think there is a certain guidelines that they can follow where they can refer them to mental health. And that's
Yeah.
why, I say partner up with a mental health. And so I've given them certain numbers, and they have numbers that they can refer them out to, so that, the pastors can have their own self-care, but also could say, okay, this is not my area. Like, you can really seek professional help.
Mhm.
And I think, maybe familiarizing it more, and for the leaders, to experience it themselves, even to be ambassadors, to say, hey, I went and, look for a therapist, and I'm gaining a lot of insight about myself. I want to tell people that, you're not going to a therapist just because you have an issue. You're going there to learn more about yourself, to
Mm.
have some more realization about yourself, of why you are the way you are, or even just having a place to process your thoughts, because we're so conditioned in a way where, I'm so conditioned to feeling this way.
Mm.
Like, whenever someone talks to me this way, I get triggered. But nobody really thinks about why that triggers you. You know what I mean? Like, why I'm talking the
Yes.
way I am. And if you actually take the time to explore yourself with a person who's professional enough to do that with you, man, your like trajectory of life could change so much, that influence. But I don't think people know that yet, not just Asian Americans, a lot of other people. But it does have a lot of stigma to it. And I really want to, bring that to light to a lot of my peers, my Korean friends, or my Asian American friends, or even other people, because it's not just Asian Americans who have that stigma.
Yes, wow. I mean, like what you said for me was really powerful because I just feel like that process step, just me
Yeah.
personally, I'm just very feeling based too, and I'm an
Yeah.
external processor, so I get in trouble a
Yeah.
lot, like because I
Yeah.
just kind of like talk, but
Yeah.
I'm realizing myself too. Even I think even like I mean maturity wise, just growing older, but even as a mom, like the
Yeah.
way that I parent even
Yeah.
is like why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
um
you sometimes see a reflection of yourself, I mean, of your mother in you as a mother, or, a reflection of how you didn't want to be, or
sure,
an
yeah.
exact opposite of your mother. Like, there are
Mhm.
so many different ways you were molded. And so to take the time to explore that in your life is, I think, doing good to yourself, so
Mm,
that, as you grow older, you get to kind of see, because, as you get older, it's just so hard to change habits, you know?
yes.
You just kind of get stuck in your way. And I think this is just everything, whether it's a job, whether it's your life, evolving and learning different things, learning tools to really better yourself. Evolving is always good, I think, for you in general, for, self improvement, or your job, or just moving forward, always evolving and being open to change, which is very hard for me, because I'm very ABC, one, two, three. I'm a creature of habit. I hate spontaneity,
Mhm.
but to be open to that, so that you become better and you evolve, I think that's so appropriate. And it would really help you prevent the burnout too, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that in itself was just really sound advice. I was going to ask you, do you have any other advice for people other than being open-minded, and just really
Yeah,
evolving all the time for people that are interested in becoming a therapist or interested in MFT at all?
yeah,
Yeah. Do you have any words for
yeah.
them?
You know, I, I think what I'm trying to instill in my kid also, and what I'm learning is, I think, I think someone just gave me this fact where there's more success rate when someone is more not used to failing, but not afraid of failing.
Mm.
And you can join an MFT program and just do a quarter of it and see if it's for you or not. You know what I mean?
Mm.
You can always try it out. And if it's not for you, then you can finally say, this is not for you. You can always, you will always learn from any life experience. You're not wasting it. And so if you think this is really for you, like, or any other graduate program you're in, the fellow students that I started the program with, not all of them graduated with me. A lot of them realized, maybe this isn't for me, and sometimes, or they took longer, I had like 70-year-old grandma next to me who graduated the program with me, and people who were engineers their whole life and decided to take this side of the road and decided to do this therapist route. And so there are different people who, explore different things. And I think, just try a quarter of the graduate program, if you are really interested, and talk to the therapist too and see if this is for you, and just seek out those people and really be active in that, and this is just any other job too, in my opinion, not being afraid of failing, and really just, if it sparked an interest in you, there's probably a reason why.
Yeah.
And try to explore why it sparked an interest in you, and see why do I keep going to this type of job, and really explore it and see, what, like, maybe I can try, and really don't be afraid of talking to people and seek out those people.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you so much, Gina. I feel like myself, I'm like a few things on my mind. I'm like, okay, the last thing you said, don't be afraid of failing. I need to be constantly thinking of that too. And I'm like, man, maybe I should be a therapist. It sounds so like, I'm like,
honestly,
wow,
Blair, you're using so much of the tool already.
Yeah.
That therapists do, called reflective listening.
It's
you're
like so
already reflecting what I'm
interesting.
saying.
So interesting.
And that's the thing. Anybody can join, and really any season of their lives, and really see. And they're night programs, just try it out and don't be afraid and see. Always talk to, because it really is. I mean, I'm telling you, and it's a versatile job,
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Gina. I really appreciate it again. I appreciate your time. If you enjoyed listening to this episode today and you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If I can't answer your questions, I'm sure I can get someone that can answer your questions for you about being a therapist or marriage and family therapy. If you want to email us, you can email us at podcastwigu@gmail.com. Thanks again, Gina. I really appreciate you. Until next time, guys. Bye.